Hey, this is Gina Grad.
Hi, this is Teresa Strasser.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Errico.
Hey there. This is Casey Cavalier.
I'm Rocky Rose.
And you are listening to The Jay Franzi Show.
Lucky you.
Welcome to The Jay Franzi Show. A behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franzi.
Well, hello, and welcome to the show. I am Jay Franzi, and this is your backstage pass to the music industry. This week, we get to talk with an amazing recording artist. We get to talk with Dalila Mya. We'll talk to her about what the music scene is like in LA, the pressure she was under growing up, and we'll discuss the difference between the music scene here in the US and over in Europe. Now, Dalila, she is not only an amazing recording artist, but she's also a physicist. And I can't wait to talk with her tonight. So if you would like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jfranzi.com. Now, let's get started. Well, let's just jump right in. Can you tell me what the music scene in your area of California is like?
Well, I'm based in Los Angeles, which is the place to be in terms of music production, whether if it's, the mainstream music business, also the underground, which is equally interesting in LA. I've been here 12 years, and before I was in London. Many differences between the two cities, for sure, particularly the approach to music business, with LA being more based on the profit side of the music industry, musicians being also a tool for marketing, not only artists, but also something to develop as a marketing tool for sure.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. What's it like just in London in general compared to LA?
Well, London has more of still is rooted into the tradition of, England being the country of the most famous rock and roll bands, from the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the electronic music scene is huge. But London still is, I would say, more into the underground scene rather than the mainstream media music. So I like to call London the old punk city versus LA being the city that evolved into the pop mainstream industry. So in London, there is still a possibility to survive as an independent artist, mostly doing live gigs. London has so many live venues that for any genre of music, and it's something that unfortunately LA is losing. It used to be a great music scene, the Sunset Strip, the Whiskey, and the Troubadour. And unfortunately, what I've been noticing in the past few years, actually more than 10 years, has been the unfortunate happening of paying for playing. So basically, these venues in LA are actually charging musicians to play at a venue. So just for the honor of being on the same stage that 40 years ago was shared by Jim Morrison of Doors. So right. Unfortunately, that's the negative side of LA. It seems like the greed and involved in the music business has become so prevailing that it's really hard to find a genuine and honest venue to play at, to where you can express yourself.
Do they still have a radio scene?
Yes. Well, with the introduction of internet, it's pretty much is going, globally, the kind of a radio scene is being fading. But there's still some authenticity. I think a lot has to do with the fact that because London, it's a city of melting pot of people from all over the world. So is LA, but for different reason. London is traditionally the city to go to escape or to change yourself, to transition into something, to kind of renew yourself, to start over. So I think still it has that sort of a authenticity, which unfortunately LA is slowly and drastically losing. So that saddens me. I kind of work and live between the two cities. I still have a place in London, and I spend a few months a year, mostly summer, which is in England, pretty much winter that we have in California. So but I see this difference to where, although London is trying to emulate the United States, particularly, the East Coast, New York, and West Coast, LA, but it's coming slower. It's this concept of, music as a 100% business. It is not really sticking in London as much as in LA.
Is the independent scene strong on the radio?
It depends on the radio. Because we have to talk about radios like we talk about a TV station or an internet website. It's like comparing Google to, research engine that does not comply with the mainstream censorship, and that applies to radio stations, unfortunately. So Last FM is a great example of English radio station that still is kind of a honest and open to any genre and open to promote any artist that does not fit into that standard mainstream, music productions, which has become kind of a flat thing. Like everything has to sound the same. Every artist has to look the same. The topics and to talk to talk about have to be the same. So Last FM is one of the good radios which I kind of listen to, where I can still find new acts, new artists that I actually enjoy.
You started your career young. You started your career as early as 5 years old.
Right.
So that means you started it in the UK. So what kind of career did you have there before moving over to the States?
So I started at the age of 5 at the Conservatory of Music, actually in Germany, where my mom was from. I'm a professional violinist. So beside the rock and roll side of me, there is actually a very classically trained person. That's my background. So by the age of 8, I was performing on stages all over Europe as a child prodigy, particularly with the music of Mozart and Mendelssohn. So my childhood was really strict, and I had a very intense training of pretty much 5-6 hours a day. So my life growing up was going to school, going to the conservatory, going home, and then practice, and then do my homework, and then go to sleep. So I was one of those children, those rock stars that you can watch a documentary on Netflix where they tell you all about their childhood, like how traumatic it was. Yes, it is, and it was for me, and I can guarantee that the real artists that are out there telling their story of how their childhood was kind of taken away from them, it was the case. I had a mom that was really very, very careful and keeping me focused on my music training, knowing that I had this gift, the perfect pitch, so the ability to pretty much playing any melody without even knowing the notes of a song. So I actually learned to read music before I learned to speak my native language.
Wow.
Then, in order to perfection the technique with the violin, I moved to Italy to study in a different conservatory. And finally, when I got out of the conservatory, I realized, okay, I spent pretty much 18 years learning how to play other people's music, which is great, but also very limiting, because I felt as I was progressing as a musician and becoming a professional, I realized that I had ideas of my own. And the moment of I would say the apocalypse for me happened when around the age of 9, 10, I listened to Violator by Depeche Mode. It came out, the CD. Back then we had the CDs, and I remember buying this CD with my weekly allowance, and I listened to the songs. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to sound like, and this is the kind of music I'm drawn to. So I decided the best thing to evolve from a classical training was to attend a technical school.
I've got too many questions. I got to get out here before you continue.
Yeah.
First of all, let's take a step back to your mother and the pressure you felt in school. Did you feel that the pressure was coming from your mother?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've unfortunately not really happy stories about I suffered concussion from violence being applied by my mother when she was discontent with my training or I wasn't playing to the perfection. So it's not just a feeling of pressure, it was physical pressure to where I was forced to practice, even though sometimes I would be tired or my back was aching. So I came out really extremely well trained, but it came with a heavy
With the
price
price.
for sure.
How long did that last?
Until I pretty much decided to get out of the house. As soon as I turned 18, that's I moved to England. I moved out of the house.
So that's 13 years.
Yes. So yes, 13 years. No, I thought it was 13 years ago. No.
Oh, well, yeah, sorry. We can all.
I was flattered, but yeah.
You can still be flattered. Please, I told you earlier you were 25. No, I mean, that's a lot of pressure for anybody, but for a kid, that's a lot of pressure.
Yes.
So, I mean, outside of the pressure of music, what was your childhood like?
Strict. Very few friends. I remember playing chess with my aunt. That was the highlight of my, of my day. But I had very little time left for, relaxing or enjoying myself or being a child. So I remember there were special occasions where I could, attend a party or, go have fun. I would, from Monday to Friday, pretty much school, and then training, and then Sunday and Saturday catching up with the homework. So I did have time. I mean, I did. I wasn't a real rebel in the sense that I stood up at some point. But in order for me to keep the physical pressure, the violence down, I had to kind of compromise. I learned to find comfort in music. So there are some artists, some albums that I treasure more than ever, because not only they were my inspiration as an artist, they were a lifesaver, something that helped me from losing my mind, possibly.
Can you give us an example of what one of those was?
Sure, definitely Dark Side of the Moon.
Okay.
Pink Floyd, Violator, for sure. Any album from Depeche Mode, actually, because they have this sort of a dark wave type of vibe. So all the Depeche Mode's music is very melancholic. It's sad, but it's also very uplifting because it's easy to relate. You can relate to that darkness, and if you listen to the lyrics, if you concentrate on the sound, on the arrangement, you can actually lift yourself and kind of put yourself above the pain and the suffering. That's pretty much, I think, the essence of Depeche Mode. It's like acknowledging the suffering and,
Rising above.
just rising above it. Yes.
Wow. All right. Well, you mentioned moving to Italy. So what was the music scene like in Italy?
Well, Italy is unfortunately the least progressive country that I would in Europe, for sure. In the sense that Italy is still bound to the tradition of opera and what we will call the bel canto, so the good singing. Italians love the good singer. It's not so much about the music genre, but it's more about a good singer. So there is a great tradition of amazing singers, but nothing really original or nothing that really stands out. Just great singers.
So nothing that we would call commercial.
No, they what Italy does when it comes to regards to pop music, is trying to emulate American artists. Whatever comes out of the United States goes. And the bond between Italy and the United States has always been strong, particularly after World War II. I mean, Italy, one of the most influenced by the NATO and the United States in general. So whatever comes out of America will be definitely welcome in Italy.
Really? It's still that way today?
Yes. There's anything from the Anglo-Saxon world. This also goes with England, but particularly with the United States.
I only laugh because I'm Italian and I've never been to Italy. I was unaware that they didn't really have much of a commercial scene of their own, but it's good to hear that they appreciate American music.
Yes.
So, how much time did you spend in Italy then?
In Italy, so was it in 5 years?
Okay,
5 years.
That's a good amount of time. Where was that 5 years spent?
In southern part of Italy, Naples, Napoli, so by the Vesuvium.
That's where my family's from.
Oh, nice.
Naples.
I'll tell you a very interesting story, because the conservatory in Naples is actually in a Roman building. So when you walk into the conservatory, you're actually walking into a Roman building built by the Romans, and still the stones, the walls, and everything is untouched and solid and strong, and has survived earthquakes and a volcano eruption, as you know, the Vesuvium. So that was for me an interesting experience in a history, because walking through the streets of Napoli, it's like walking through an open museum. And you walk in between the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, Baroque, Gothic, Industrial Revolution. There's a quarter for each and every historical era, that because Napoli is the oldest city in Italy. Some people don't know, but it was the first city built by the Phoenician, which were the first colonizers of Italy, of the peninsula. So Cuba, which is a town next to Naples, was the very first town ever existed in Italy. And you can tell by just walking through the streets.
That's got to be amazing. I have to do it at some point. But you mentioned the building and the structure. You're an engineer. Does that structure, does it sound good there?
Oh, yes. There is absolutely no soundproofing work done in the conservatory. And very interesting, there is no AC or heating systems for winter, summer, because the Romans were known for building counter walls. So building a wall and then two walls and an empty space in between. That empty space will provide a cool air in summer through the wind breeze, and keep the building, the inside, warm from the outside, the cold from coming in, preventing from coming in. So not only excellent sound, but perfect temperature inside, because the Romans were actually the ones that invented the concrete by mixing what it's very, very, very common, popular in southern Italy, which is granite, with a sea sand. And by combining these two elements, they created the first prototype of what we call we have the concrete. So, and they knew how to do it even better than we know nowadays. I can tell.
Well, out of those 3 or 4, which one would you prefer to be in?
For retirement and having a good time and do nothing, absolutely Italy, by all means. If I had to enjoy myself for the rest of my life, if I were a billionaire retiring and living in buying a piece of land and retiring, Italy is heaven on earth. It is best food on earth, the history, the people, some of the nicest people on earth, and beautiful landscape, beautiful the sea, the beaches, beautiful. Napoli is known for the Sorrento and the Amalfi coast. If I had to work, not for a day, I would would run out of Italy. I would last a week. because then I would prefer working with Germans in Germany.
Really? Why is that?
Italians know how to enjoy themselves, but it's really hard to be on time, to be on schedule, because enjoying yourself does not include the idea of having a clock. So it's all very philosophical. Italians are philosophers. There's a history of and philosophy they must be taken slow. If you want to think and enjoy yourself or evolve yourself and become an intellectual, then you have to lose the track of time.
All right. And then
Germany for work, but then after I be done working, I will take a plane and go to Italy for a happy hour, because in Germany I wouldn't have a second of fun. I can tell as a German, I'm glad that part of my heritage is Italian, because if it was from my mom's side, I would have no sense of humor whatsoever. It is not a German quality. Sense of humor and fun, it's considered a waste of time.
Really?
Yeah, anything that is not productive, it's a waste of time. Anything that does not lead you to do something, materially doing something, it's a waste of time.
So all the great comedians that come from Germany?
Well, have you noticed that? Yeah, that probably the last time they had a comedy show was with Monty Python.
Really?
Yeah, the story that Germany hired Monty Python in post World War II because they needed some fun. After I don't have to explain what to your listeners what happened in World War II, particularly in Germany. So the Germans were craving some fun, something to laugh about, and the government decided to hire Monty Python because they didn't have any comedian, never had. So.
All right. So you're in the States now, but you have a background in engineering and producing, which started with a school called SAE Institute. Which campus did you go to the school?
The London one, North London.
North
I
London.
believe now we moved to East London. Yeah.
Okay. And what was it like there?
Oh, beautiful. I had the time of my life. First of all, it's a school that opens at noon. And just for that, I loved it. Actually, technically 10 a.m., but I never seen anybody in the first 2 hours of business. And closes at 3 a.m. because, for the career you're choosing as a sound engineer, sooner or later you will kind of move your schedule toward, the late afternoon, evening, considering, shows and recording studios usually operate or the midday / afternoon / evening / night, or sometimes 24/7. And also there was a great concept behind it, because it is true and it is scientifically correct, because in art we use mostly primarily our right side of the brain, and that's the part of our brain that actually wakes up later in the day when we start producing melatonin. So it is actually true that the inspiration usually comes later in the day. So they were aware of that, and actually encouraging students to take, the time and the schedule that there was the best for, operating at 100%. And that was the time of my life because one of my professors was Alan Parsons.
Oh.
And for people that don't know, Alan Parsons was the sound engineer behind Pink Floyd, beside being a music producer himself with an excellent project, the Alan Parsons Project. So,
Yep.
And that was probably the reason number one why I decided for that, I picked that campus, because he was one of the associate professors. So he basically seminars, not a resident professor, but I learned a lot with him, a lot.
And it goes back to Pink Floyd,
Yes.
your inspiration. I ask you about SAE because I taught there for a few years. I was teaching in Nashville for 3 years at the campus there. And it was a great school. And I really, really enjoyed being there. And like you said, I get to meet all of those people, Alan Parsons and the rest of the producers and engineers that would come through town and speak at the school. I mean, as far as an audio engineering and production school, they would bring in the best of the best. So the celebrities within that industry, which are the Alan Parsons or the Dan Huff or the Bob Bullocks. These are the people that would come by and teach a seminar at these schools. It was an absolutely amazing experience. Even being on the teaching side of it, it was just a great campus to be on. I mean, especially in Nashville. In Nashville, we'd be in a classroom looking out the back window, and it would look down at Soundstage, which is one of the biggest studios in the world. And the back of that studio was Chuck Ainley's studio, who is one of the most popular engineers in the world. He did Mark Knopfler's records and so forth. But you would see him standing in the back of the parking lot outside of his door, just talking to all these big artists. It was just a great environment to be around. So I'm glad to hear you had a good experience with it. It's a really cool place. When you finished at SAE, what was your next step?
Well, then, because I got so much in love with the scientific side of, yes, after hearing that you're from Nashville, and you probably know Mr. Manley, so I love you even more.
Yes.
Well, he came for a seminar in London, and it was absolutely the most humble person and fun. Like I can say, yes, he made a few jokes. And being myself of one of their favorite customers, I mean, I do have a very moo, and I love the sound of Manley. It just, it's, my second choice after SSL, just because SSL, it's more of a clear kind of compressor. So it's more like a multitasking. But the very moo, it's what I use, the color. I love the color. But Manley and Alan Parsons had something special that they had in common that I've seen only in top-notch professionals. The humility, the honesty, the simplicity, the non-arrogance, the non-narcissism, the non-ego part of these people that changed the history of the history of music for real. Particularly if you know, like you do behind the scenes, what is going on in the studio. That those two people, they really changed the game for us and for good.
And not just from the music they created, but with Manley, it's the tools that he created.
Yes.
So your next step after the school?
After the school, I decided I wanted to get more deeper into the studies of frequencies and the scientific side. So the choice was enrolling the University of Cambridge, and I majored in physics.
Okay. Not a bad school.
Yeah. Yeah, Stephen Hawking, came out of Cambridge. Yeah. The campus I went to was the one in London, because Cambridge is, you probably know the House of Cambridge is like a little bit like the UC circuit of a university here in California. You have UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, UC San Francisco, being Berkeley. So I went to the campus in London, and it was another amazing experience because that's where I entered the matrix. Like, okay, I was like Neo, like opening this gate into the, decoding the matrix, of which.
Well, tell me about that. That's what I want to know about right there.
Well, the training in physics begins with a very standard knowledge of what the traditional physics is, which is pretty much the laws of nature as we know them, as we were told them, I would say. So there's a lot of that, particularly the first couple of years, you stick with mathematics and then science and microbiology and physics and then calculus and all that stuff. The fun part comes when then you apply for the doctorate, so to complete the degree and eventually become a PhD. So that was the fun part, because I had mentors and professors that introduced me to the theory of quantum, I would say that's not a theory. It's probably the honest truth behind the laws of nature, being quantum physics and string theory and the different hypotheses, because the main question that physicists pose to themselves and to the universe is like, first of all, why we're here, what we're doing here, and why things work in a certain way. And because we realize that sometimes things don't work in the way they should, the anomaly becomes the interesting thing to research. So I've devoted the last 2 years of my years in the university studying, specializing on microwaves, because I do agree with Tesla, the famous scientist, that in order to approach reality, we should just forget about the idea of matter or atoms and smaller parts and quantums. We need to approach reality in terms of frequencies, in terms of vibration. So I am one of the scientists that do believe that everything matters breaks down to frequencies and vibrations. The reason why certain frequencies we perceive as matter is just because the wavelength is such as to where we have the illusion of matter. I know it's hard to put into kind of, they can approach like, but I'm touching something here. Yes, but ask yourself something. When you're dreaming, let's say, and you feel like there is something, have you ever dreamed something so realistic that you woke up like, oh, but that felt real?
Absolutely.
So I want to tell people, well, what if your life is a big dream? What if maybe we're all kind of experiencing a sort of a daydream here? Maybe the reality is somewhere else. I'm not saying, just, being a physicist taught me to ask myself questions all the time. And please do not ever take seriously the people that tell you to trust the science, because science, it's something that must be debatable all the time. If we stop debating and arguing science and arguing with scientists, then science dies itself.
Well, that's a good point. When you went into the school compared to when you got out of the school, what is something that you look at differently now?
Well, as I became a physicist, first of all, I started caring a little less about the ego aspect of my career. Growing up as a musician, performing on stage since I was a kid, first as a violinist, and then with my own project, and then for other people as a sound engineer, I was always exposed to the big crowd, and where, you pretty much showcase your ego. That's all about a work of ego. That's which is not something negative. It's just that we are here in this world to experience, the ego needs to experience the physical. But I came out being more aware that anything I do in the material world, particularly in my career, is brittle. It's something that will not determine who I am at a universal level, at a soul level. What I do helps me, seeking some material reward, and of course, the finances, which
Right.
are important.
Allow
We
you
all
to pay
need-
the bills a little bit.
Yeah, but on a bigger scale, I am just a dot here, and I am here to experience something. So regardless of where my career will go or whatever happens, I'm here for the bigger picture, for the bigger game. So I learned very much to look at the world in a different perspective, maybe more stoic, more detached. Like whatever happens is fine, but there is a bigger purpose to be pursued for sure.
So your project, you mentioned your project. How would you describe that project to us?
So MYA project is something, I call it a one-woman band. Because people ask me all the time, oh, okay, how many of you, or who plays this, who plays that? I do it all. I'm like a was Prince that would record his own drums and guitars and sing and write and everything. Like, oh, but weird. No, it's not. I am not a virtuoso with a. I play a little bass, I play a little guitar. I love synthesizers, of course, and having a classical training with the violin helped me tremendously to pick up pretty much any other instrument. Believe me when I say when you learn violin, anything else is downhill. uh, Violin is probably one of the most challenging. I'm not saying the most, but one of the top probably five. So I have the ability to pretty much pick up other instruments, and with my favorite being bass, I just relate to the frequencies of bass. And then I have my beautiful Moog synthesizer, which is my top choice for producing most of the sounds in my album. So MYA project stands for many years ago project. I started probably while I was at the essay school, so in my 20s, early 20s, and it was rough. It was unpolished, and my music kind of reflects my growth as an artist. So I didn't publish anything until I was ready to really put it out. I only released 4 albums, although MYA project started way before, because I wanted my audience to hear la creme de la creme, something that was mature enough. And I never bought into this thing of having to produce music when you're young, because as a pop artist you have to go out there. By the age of 20 you have to be out there, and then by the age of 30 you're too old. I don't care. I do not. I don't think there's a timeline or a deadline for being creative. So I decided to release my first album when I was ready to, which kind of it was in 2010. And my latest dystopia, I think, is the proof that I did it. I made it. I grew up. I am now in that age of my life where I think I'm at the peak of my creativity. And Dystopia was an album that started in 2019. I wrote the first song, Rain, and then it kind of spanned during COVID. So although the title and the music and the most of the songs were different, going through the experience of the what they call pandemic, was a kind of a life-changing, and it made an impact in choosing the name of the album and the cover art.
All right, my friend. Well, we do this thing here we call Unsung Heroes, where we take a moment to shine the light on somebody who works behind the scenes or somebody who may have supported you along the way. Do you have anybody you'd like to shine a little light on?
Well, Abbey Road Studios, if I can mention the studio rather than a person.
Sure.
I have an interesting story because I worked at Abbey Road Studios as an assistant, and while Coldplay were recording Viva La Vida. So, yeah, that was what I would call the right place at the right time. What happened is, the album Viva La Vida was recorded partly with the Royal Philharmonic of London, and the orchestra. Abbey Road has got a beautiful recording studio where they can fit the full orchestra, and the sound is amazing. So we had 2 days of a recording with the orchestra, doing all the takes and everything. A week later, we're working on the mix down, and the engineer has the idea. Okay, we need some counter strokes, which with a violin means doing the counter rhythm to, like with a guitar you would do like the counter rhythm on the main guitar, the lead guitar. So with the violin you can do the same. But the orchestra was gone, and the producer didn't want to pay for another day of recording an orchestra, which is kind of expensive at Abbey Road. So they realized that was a professional violinist. Said, okay, can you actually record the counter strokes? We need 5 tracks of violin on Viva La Vida. So I actually ended up playing on the record on the truck, Viva Vida of Coldplay, with my violin. You can hear it, my counter strokes in the middle of the second verse and the second chorus. You can hear my violin right there. And it just happened because I was the right place, the right time. That's actually what opened my doors as a session musician, as a sound engineer, because having the credit and having the sort of being looked up as somebody that she recorded with Coldplay. So it opened a lot of doors for me in the industry in London.
A big thanks to Dalila for taking the time to share her stories with us, and thank you for taking the time to hang with me here. I really do appreciate it. If you know anyone that would enjoy this episode, please be sure to share it. You can do that and find the links to everything mentioned over at jfranzi.com/episode 102. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franzi Show. Make sure you visit us at jfranzi.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.